Parsippany. The buildings behind you, obviously, there were a number of buildings that were implicated in this particular situation. The information that came in on the 911 female and was actually parked inside of a parking lot adjacent to the building. Numerous police agencies responded to that location. They had been told on the 911 call that the individual that shot and killed the woman had indicated on the 911 call that he had actually made to the police as well, that he was armed and that if anybody approached him that he was going to fire upon them. In fact, the police officers from numerous agencies had approached the suspect vehicle, and in fact, the individual did fire 3 rounds at the police officers. The police officers, fearing for their lives, exchanged fire back and neutralized the suspect. As you guys know, there was a tactical team of perimeter set around these buildings in an attempt to try to ensure that there was not another shooter. Law enforcement at that time did not know whether or not there was still another active shooting situation to be engaged in. And law enforcement had also found out from calls being made by people inside the building that they were actually barricading themselves in fear of another shooter at that location. Law enforcement had tactical entry from the Morris County Prosecutor's Office as well as the Morris County Sheriff's Office search team. Those individuals cleared that location. Many of you were asking why it was people were removed in handcuffs. Those were individuals who were being removed from the building because at that particular point in time, for safety of the officers, we weren't sure whether or not those individuals were also engaged in the active shooting situation. Once it became clear that those individuals were not involved and that they were actually civilians who were being rescued, the handcuffs were removed, they were debriefed and removed from the scene safely. The investigation is ongoing. The scene is being processed, as you know, behind you. The female victim who was shot and killed by the suspect has been identified as Christine King. Date of birth is 11/63. She's a white female from Oak Ridge, New Jersey, 47 years of age. The person who is alleged to have shot her and was neutralized by the police in the gunfire was Leonardo Perea, P-A-R-E-R-A. Date of birth March 1972, 39 years of age, is a white male from Kearney, New Jersey. These 911 calls will be released once they have been verified and placed into evidence. Captain Paul will discuss that with you. But essentially what we have here, as an overall nutshell, is Mr. Perea had shot and killed Ms. King. They both worked at the same facility, at the Realty facility. He then got into a vehicle. He himself called 911 and advised that anybody who tried to encounter him, that he would shoot at them. The officers attempted to engage the individual, the suspect, and to place him into custody. He fired shots at the police returned fire, and he was killed. That's the case.
What officer shot the individual?
Well, that's a long part of the investigation to go. We have a lot of witnesses to interview, including the police officers, including a number of witnesses, police officer witnesses. There were, in fact, witnesses that were looking from outside of the building. We have a significant amount of information from them. I will tell you this, all the information that we're gathering from the witnesses that were inside the scene, the barricaded witnesses, as well as the information we received with the 911 call, we have significant information that corroborates the fact that the suspect engaged the police officers in fire first, and that the firing was at these police officers, and it was only until that time that the police officers re-engaged or engaged them, the suspect in the shooting. So the preliminary stages of this investigation looked at the officer's safety was clearly compromised, that this individual had indicated on the 911 tape that he would engage in firing on anybody who approached him. He in fact did that with the police officers, and the police officers, in fear of their lives and in protection of themselves as well as the community, fired back, and the suspect was killed.
Was the man working at...
We're looking into, that situation. We know that they work together, and we're gaining more and more information with regard to that, but it would be premature at this point. Our primary concern right now is crime scene processing. We have basically 3 crime scenes that we have to process. While the preliminary investigation reveals that the officers were justified in the shooting, nevertheless, we have to make sure that we investigate both the killing of the woman in terms of that. That's one piece of this case, the major crime piece. And of course, the prosecutor's office is responsible for ensuring that the shooting was done according to the Attorney General guidelines and appropriately done, which I will emphasize and repeat. The preliminary investigation clearly shows at this point in time that these officers were justified in neutralizing the suspect.
Was there any clear motive as to why this came?
Yeah, we're looking into that right now, and I don't mean to be coy with you at this point in time, because you guys know me from the past. When I have solid information that we can reveal to you, I will. But right now, we don't have a clear picture of that at this particular point in time, but it is certainly something that the investigative team is looking into, what the reason was for the shooting. Suffice it to say, though, it is clear they worked together, and he is the individual who shot and killed her. The motive's being looked into.
Was he calling 911 from that particular office?
I'm not really sure. I believe the answer to that question is yes. There was communications that were made from people from within that office to 911, so there's a lot of 911 activity happening here. There's individuals calling in and indicating that the woman was shot and killed. She had been shot a number of times, and simultaneously the suspect is calling 911 as well, indicating that if anybody approaches him, he's going to fire upon them. I can tell you from having listened to the 911 tape that the dispatchers were dispatching to the police that it was intent to, and I'll use the word, quote-unquote, escalate the situation if he was approached, and that he had a long-arm rifle and at least a handgun, if not more than another handgun. That was the information that came into the police that were dispatched to the scene.
Was he calling 911 to actually threaten the police and say if you come this way?
Again, the 911 call he was making was indicating at the preliminary stages of this investigation, from what I have listened to, that if anyone encountered him, he would escalate the situation. He did not identify the police officer specifically, but basically had said that if anyone had approached him, that he would escalate the situation. At this point in time, I don't know that. I mean, obviously he shot and killed somebody, so I'm confident in saying they were in fear of their lives. But until we're able to debrief all these individuals, including the officers, I wouldn't have a specific answer to that question. No. I can tell you that from anecdotal information that I received being out of the scene last night, that one of the rounds came very close to hitting one of the officers.
Was he on his own completely, or was there anyone else involved?
The answer to the question is he was on his own, but initially, again, you have to understand, as I'm sure you guys can see from the layout that you have behind you, when the information came in, all we had was that there was somebody who had fired shots. We weren't sure if there was another suspect. That's why you saw all the officers setting up a perimeter around the area, making sure that there was containment, and that's why you saw a slow movement into the buildings. And I got to tell you, I think you guys were out here and you saw it. I saw it myself personally, and I can't tell you how impressed I was with all the law enforcement agencies, because these guys, not knowing the circumstances, with 3 buildings of people who are barricaded, had to essentially set up points, perimeters, make sure that they made tactical entries that didn't risk anybody's lives, went in not knowing if there was another shooter. Again, as I indicated to you, to show you that they don't know if it's another shooter, people were coming out in handcuffs because they didn't know what they were dealing with. And I think that that kind of shows you firsthand what these officers go through when they walk into a building not knowing who the bad guy may or may not be. So I'm very proud of what the law enforcement prosecutor's office as well as the sheriff's office did in the manner in which they neutralized and made sure that the community was safe, and the officers were safe, and the people inside the building were safe. Okay, folks, we'll give you further updates when they come along. That's all I can really verify right now.
How about as far as the weapons? What was eventually found on?
We're not going to get into that at this point in time because there's still a collection of evidence going on, but there were obviously handguns and weapons found that were used to fire at the officers.
And was she married?
I believe she was, yes.
Could you listening to the 911 tape that he called, could you characterize how he sounded? Did he sound panicked, or was he selective saying, if you come this way, this is what you get, or was he...
Yeah, I don't like to characterize evidence because we're going to give it to you. So you can make whatever judgments you want on it. I will say this. In terms of the communication that was going on between New Jersey State, which is the communication we were most concentrating on at that point in time, was the communication between the New Jersey State Police and Morris County Communications Center. We already knew that he had made an indication that he was going to fire upon anybody that tried to approach him. So that wasn't really as relevant to us as was the communication between the agencies. And I think when you listen to it, you'll be impressed yourselves about the manner in which they were communicating that data. And I know that that sounds like an easy thing to say, but in the panic of the situation, a lot of times when there's communication, occurring. It's not necessarily what you want it to be. This was done stellar between the New Jersey State Police and the Communications Center, and communicating that to the officers, obviously, who risked their lives when they were approaching this individual who was firing on them. We don't, and again, we have to get all that information. I would be remiss right now if I told you a number of rounds were fired at him by a number of police officers. That's part of the investigation. We're counting shell casings, weapons have been recovered from the officers, clothing has been recovered from the officers. We're doing an investigation, a professional standards investigation of the officers, and again, I want to emphasize so that it's clear, there is nothing to suggest that these officers did anything other than put their lives at risk and return fire only when they were fired upon. So the preliminary investigation clearly shows to me, and you guys may know me well enough to know that I don't make these assessments quickly, that these officers were completely justified. Nevertheless, we collect all of these things and investigate every aspect, dot every I, cross every T, to make sure it was done correctly. But Davie, to answer your question directly, numerous agencies and numerous police officers fired at the suspect when they were fired.
Did he target anybody else in the building?
Again, I really don't know the answer to that at this point in time, and we'll know until those people